gathered together from the cosmic reaches of the universe. Here, in this great hall of the Signal Watch, are the most powerful forces of good ever assembled. Join us as we discuss all manner of topics across the multiverse of comic books, history, creators, storylines, movies, and more. The Signal Watch podcast presents Kryptonian Thought Beast, a comics podcast series dedicated to truth, justice, and peace for all mankind. And sir, we are recording. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is...
This is Stuart. Hello.
Hey, Stuart, and we brought you back. As long as we'd already talked about Superman the movie, I thought it'd be a good idea to follow up with Superman 2 for any number of reasons. So do you remember when you first saw this movie, or is that too far in the long ago?
No, I remember. It was actually the first Superman movie, the first superhero movie I saw in the theater. I have it was a sold out crowd. It was packed. And I have a really strong memory of that sense of being in the dark theater in the crowd of people that were excited to see the movie. And that first scene when he goes into the alley and changes and does the run, morphing change and lift off into the sky with the music. And it was just like this, it was a memorable theater experience.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing it in the theater, but my memory is mostly like of after having had seen it. Well, I remember being really weirded out that I was seeing Superman in bed with Lois. And I remember, because that was like Dynasty TV stuff that my parents would have normally pushed me out of the room, during that window of my life.
In a really shiny bed.
Yes. So and I was like, I understood, kind of coded that with like a whole disco lifestyle that we did not have going on.
That's right. No, I think it's supposed to be futuristic.
Well, I know that now.
I look at it now, and it just doesn't seem futuristic. But yeah.
But at the time, I was just like, Superman's got this weird, bed, and I don't know what's going on with this movie.
It never would have occurred to me where he slept in the fortress until we saw that bed. That is a weird bed too. It looks like it's kind of growing into the it's like a. It's just suspended from multiple points. It's like this sort of star shape. It's pretty odd. I'd be interested to know the history of the production design of the bed and all the discussions that went into what should Superman's bed look like. Because I'm sure there were meetings about it and memos and such.
Oh yeah. And the sad thing is, in this day and age, it really comes off as the same thing as having a water bed.
It really does. It looks like a water bed, yeah. But I was watching the movie with my 5-year-old a few days ago, and one of the things he remarked was, "Hey, he's got a cool bed." So, it doesn't look dated to everyone, I guess.
No, I mean, there's no context for silver lame sheets, I guess, for your kid.
He's like, that's a cool bed.
One day, kid, if you play your cards right, you too can have it.
Yeah, we can get you one.
But this is the one that everyone remembers who don't as you and I have watched these movies dozens and dozens of times over and over, this is the one that everyone remembers as being, and I'm doing air quotes here, the good one. They remember Superman, the movie, as being kind of slow and strange. And this is the action-packed one with the memorable villains, where Superman actually, fights, which, by the way, should have been a note to the studio when Superman Returns was being done. And anyway,
people expect Superman to fight.
They want superheroes to fight. Yeah.
Yeah. They want Superman to throw a punch at some point.
Which I'm not sure he actually does in this movie.
Yeah. He he almost throws a punch. I remember that. Because there's a bit where he's almost about to hit someone and they grab him and he's in his fist back. But yeah, one of the cool things about that, or to me cool about that scene, is a lot of the fight happens off camera. So, when Nan takes him underground, right, and pushes him through the street, and it's Metropolis is just experiencing earthquakes, and you hear the sounds of the fight, and they're down there fighting with the Ninja Turtles, or whatever. and I mean, so in retrospect, when you think back to it, you're like, oh yeah, that was a big fight, but really none of it was shown, or very little of it,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, Ursa throwing, sewer lids at him and him getting thrown through the Marlboro truck and all that kind of stuff. And so it does have this big climactic ending. But what people, I think, often don't quite remember, because you saw it often when you were a kid or whatever, is this was a movie that had a lot of production problems. Superman 1 and 2 were originally written, I'm not telling you this, Stuart, I assume you know. We were written as like one long script originally by Mario Puzo. Then the Newmans came in and did their draft, and then Mankiewicz came in and did his draft. And Superman, the movie, as you think of it, was this thing that was kind of lopped off at a point in shooting where the Salkins, the producers, the father and son producing duo, were like, we really need to put something out so we can have money to finish Superman 2 or have a second movie, because this is one long movie. It's super expensive and we got nothing to show for it so far. And so they took the ending of what was supposed to be Superman 2, tacked it on to the end of Superman the movie, and then they were going to have to figure out how to wrap up Superman 2 once it became 2 movies instead of one long movie. Now, both of these movies are very long. I don't know what anybody was thinking back at the studio, thinking that I can't imagine how this script looked where they thought this was going to be a 2-hour movie or 2.5-hour movie at some point, because it's so different from Superman the movie, which has this kind of triptych feel. And then this movie feels more like a Superman comic in a lot of ways, especially from this era.
Yeah, it feels enclosed. It's more colorful. Mm-hmm. There's less of the hazy photography. There's less of the like grand vistas, the David Lean-esque stuff. And there's more just like, this is a set that's supposed to be an average, street in Metropolis kind of thing,
Yeah. Just even like the whole Niagara Falls thing. I don't know how the whole Niagara Falls thing fits in with whatever was the original script, if it was supposed to be one movie.
I think that was added actually after they had decided to take out. So there's so many different versions of this, but so my understanding is, so they released Superman the movie, and at that point, everybody starts arguing. Marlon Brando sues because he's not getting his percentage fast enough, right? And famously, he gets like $15 million, and they're like, out of spite, they just cut him out of the sequel. And they claim it's for, creative reasons, but really it's just because they don't want to pay him any more money.
Right.
And then, Richard Donner continues feuding with the Salkins, and to the point where they're like, we don't want this guy anymore. And now they have to rewrite things around not having Marlon Brando there. So they bring David and Leslie Newman back in. And my understanding is that the Niagara Falls scene was added after they took out Richard Donner and Marlon Brando, The Niagara Falls was added to replace the earlier scene, what the scene that was supposed to be at the beginning of the movie where Lois tricks him into, I don't know, excuse me, I'm confusing it. The one where she falls out the window of the Daily Planet, right?
Oh, okay.
She jumps out the window of the Daily Planet initially, and he finds a way to save her without revealing himself. But there is a point where now that they've lost the director, the new director is not going to be able to claim credit unless he directs a certain percentage, unless a certain percentage of the footage that ends up on screen is his. So they have to write new stuff and reshoot stuff. And that's one of the things they did to replace Richard Donner's shot footage. And then the Niagara Falls scene was the replacement for the stuff that they never got around to shooting, which was where she shot him with blanks.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Okay. Because I think I've seen that in deleted scenes on one of the discs.
Yeah, yeah.
And that may have been...
It's pretty confusing though, honestly, because there's so many different versions. There's so many different writers on it at so many different points. It's hard to remember, whose version was which and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a minor miracle that the movie holds together at all, and it's something of a testament to people wanting to get this thing done. But yeah, I mean, you're talking only like 2 years after they wrapped Superman the movie, went through all of this drama, somehow got scenes written, pulled all the actors back to finish it up, and I guess inserted all this Niagara Falls jazz, and it basically holds together. It has some logical holes, like as does the first one, but it basically works, and it's the one that people end up remembering as having this rich drama that resonated with them more than the hero's journey or whatever of the first movie, which I would just will flat out say I think this is a really good fun movie, but when you have watched it a few dozen times, you see all of the seams.
Oh yeah.
And it makes it a harder viewing experience than Superman the movie.
The one that, as far as the seams, the thing that always got me was the reuse of footage of the car from the green car that they're driving as they're coming back from the North Pole. I'm like, first of all, that same shot was used in the last movie, and it was a different car. We know that car. We know where that road is, and it has nothing to do with them. And secondly, where did they get the car? How did they get there?
Yeah. It was really hard for him to get back, but apparently not so hard to leave.
But yeah, they could get back to civilization with no problem.
Yeah, it's the Fortress of Solitude Avis rent-a-car.
That's the kind of stuff that started to show itself to me, upon the, 10th or 11th or 12th viewing when I was a kid. But, the first few times, I don't know, I just kind of went along with it because it was fun, and also I was a kid, and it wasn't too demanding of it. But yeah, as far as the one that people remember, it's sort of like Star Trek 4. People remember when they think, people who are not fans, right, who don't really care. You've mentioned Star Trek movies, and they're like, oh, yeah, the one with the whales is the good one, and because it's got a lot of humor, it's accessible, it's not bogged down in long relationships and things like that. And that, I feel like Superman 2 is like that. It's the one that people remember because it has it was really the first big superhero action sequence that we ever got on the big screen, right? It was, and so that was memorable about it. It's got the personal drama of Lois finally finding out Superman's secret identity, and their relationship kind of being allowed to at least temporarily move forward. And whereas that wasn't a point of suspense in this, it was just we were only held in suspense for one movie. But in another sense, people who are familiar with the characters know that Lois doesn't know who Superman is, and she's always trying to find out. She suspects that Clark is Superman. That's part of the the old TV series. And every episode, she's like, "Hey, Clark, I thought I saw you duck out of sight just as Superman showed up." And somehow, he manages to show her up again and not reveal his secret identity. Well, decades and decades later, finally we get to see oh, this is what happens when she finally realizes that Clark Kent is Superman. So I think that's a big deal that people remember too.
Yeah, it's funny. There are times in this movie, and Richard Lester is the second director who was brought in, and he done, I want to say, Help and Hard Day's Night, and the Three Musketeers movie.
Musketeers movies, yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, I've never seen them, and so I've always been kind of curious to go back and watch them to see what the Salkins were thinking bringing him in. One of the things that Simon has said to me is the guy who's in the boat drinking the coffee when Ursa and Nan and Zod show up, and Zod sinks into the creek. That he's apparently like a Richard Lester staple.
Oh,
And
I
he's
didn't
always
realize
like
that.
standing off on the side, like being surprised by stuff or something. I'm not sure. I need to verify that with Simon at some
Yeah,
point.
that
But
got past me.
yeah,
Is it he the guy? Is he the same guy who slips on the marbles in Superman 3?
could be. I never
Now that I
thought
think
to me
about
to
it, he
check.
seems like, I feel like he's maybe the guy who slipped on the marbles at the opening sequence of Superman 3.
Yeah. But I mean, and so yeah, there's this whole sensibility that it's also entered into this one of Donner had this whole idea of we need to, what the word he used was verisimilitude. But you wanted to create the sense of this is a real character living in this world. And this movie goes kind of back in a lot of ways that I think people don't remember to the camp sort of aspect. And like Richard Donner's movie has comedy in it. Do not think it does not. I mean, there's some hilarious stuff in there. There's stuff that doesn't work so well. But this movie finds superheroes silly again in some
Yeah,
ways.
sure.
And like that big fight scene at the end, once the villains are like blowing everybody down the street in what is supposed to be a scene of terror, we have instead literally wigs flying off of heads. We have two
Yeah,
different
yeah,
scenes of
yeah.
people trying to stay on the phone.
It's almost it's a preview of what you're gonna get at the opening of Superman 3, where it's just a full-on slapstick routine.
Yeah. Which
You know?
honestly, I think that's fine for an opening routine, but tonally at this point where you're supposed to be like, oh my God, people think Superman's dead, and all whatever is going on in this sequence. The tone is just like, whatever, it's superheroes, who cares?
Yeah,
And so it's kind of weird. I think so one of the things we will need to also talk about is the Richard Donner cut that came out later, but I think there's less of all of that, although there's still some of it. So I never was really clear on how much of this was shot by Donner, how much was shot by Lester. Did Lester go back and add a bunch of the wacky stuff with the wigs and whatnot? Like, it doesn't really bother me, the lady coming out with the baby cart and Superman keeps the antenna from landing on her. Like,
yeah.
that's just Superman, saving the day. But it really is the other stuff that it's like, why is there a guy in roller skates being blown backward wearing a sparkly vest?
It happened. That is the worst. That is the worst coincidence. That as soon as three supervillains start using their super breath to create a wind turbine down the street, you just happen to be there in roller skates.
Yeah, that you happen to be in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's not to take away from the movie so much as to be like,
Yeah.
let's put this movie in context for how you probably remember it versus how it actually plays out.
I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways, I think that when I was talking to you about it before, you said, Superman, the movie is a film and Superman 2 is a movie, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that on a lot of levels, not just the slapstick and the more campy humor, but also just the way it's shot. The music. They couldn't get John Williams to come back, and so it's it's still really good music,
Mm-hmm.
but it's clearly someone else riffing on John Williams, and I believe they switched out production designers because this is now. They had taken so long in between, the reshoots and completion of Superman 2, that, people's contracts had expired and they had trouble getting people back, and including even Christopher Reeve. They almost lost Christopher Reeve to Somewhere in Time because they had waited so long that his original contract, term had expired. And so they had to get him back now, So yeah, it's really a different, it's when you say that it's hard to tell which parts were shot by Donner and which parts were shot by Lester. There are some scenes where it's really clear, and I was reminded of that when I watched it again recently, where Lois just looks completely different in her scenes in the Fortress of Solitude at the end, and her scenes at the Daily Planet. There's shots where her hair is just completely different. And her makeup is completely different. There are many continuity errors where it's easy now for me. I didn't see it at the time when I was a kid, but to spot the Gene Hackman stand-in.
Mm-hmm.
And Gene Hackman all of a sudden has his back turned to the camera all the time.
Yeah. There's the scene where he gets dumped off, I think, by Ursa, and he stands up and shakes his fist. And every time we see that scene, Jamie and I both say in sync, "Not Gene Hackman." So
yeah, yeah.
But I don't. This is a terrible thing to do, to talk about a woman's appearance for any length of time. But there's a Margot Kidder in this movie who looks beautiful and vibrant, and her hair is done perfectly in every scene. And if you get to the Daily Planet scenes, and I know you know this, I'm just saying this for other people, like, they will cut from shot to shot. If it's a close-up, it's Margot Kidder 2 years later, who has like bloodshot eyes and does not look well, because apparently she was going through a divorce during all of this and was in bad straits. And they didn't bother, like, her hair just looks complete. It's not tucked behind her ears. One, that's part of how you can spot it. But it may be a wig. I don't know. But they just didn't really go for the glamour shots. They weren't ensuring that she looked as good as she could in those shots, and she just doesn't look well. And it's not, and I don't know if they were trying to tell themselves, oh, she's supposed to be upset or grieving or whatever in these moments, but instead she just looks like no one put her through hair and makeup before they put her on the set.
Yeah, and it's really glaring.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, she's still fine in the scenes. She's still, doing her bit, but it's just really rough that they thought that this was okay as they were cranking through. But you also hear things about how Richard Lester was shooting things with like TV multi-camera setups and really flat lighting, all of which like they take, like you talked about them changing the set designers and all of this. Well, in the prior movie, Lois and Clark had been in the bullpen at typewriters, and that was part of the dynamic. And in this one, clearly they're like, we don't have that set anymore, but we also need to contain these two talking to each other. So they built, suddenly Lois has an office, which, great, good. She got a promotion, which is actually how I read it as a kid. I remember.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But it's clearly they shot it like a sitcom or something. Like they're not filming it anymore. Like you are getting, all the President's Men or whatever in the Daily Planet newsroom. We're not going for that kind of camera stuff. We're going for a multi-camera setup where we can get as much coverage as we can to knock this crap out and get these scenes done. And this, by the way, is light years ahead of how things look by the time we get to Superman 4. So, but we can talk about that one. Superman 4. But yeah, it's just really strange that it's and not. I mean, at the same time, it was a business decision, and they needed to get their movie out, and they kind of know at the end of the day, a lot of people don't really know the difference. It's going to be the critics who are going to be the ones who spot those things. So,
yeah, I mean, I didn't know the difference for a long time. I did, I like I said, it was probably a few years into me watching it over and over again on VHS before I noticed that. And then when this movie came out, there was there probably was VHS, but it wasn't like in everybody's houses yet. So, not everything is meant to be picked apart, frame by frame like it is now. But you asked me before if I remembered us when I saw it. When did you see Superman 2 for the first time?
I saw it in the theater. I'd seen both of these in the theater. And I remember being really excited about it coming out because I rebought it when I was with you in Metropolis. There was a Superman 2 like pamphlet thing that came out, like making of, which I'd had as a kid and lost in the intervening years, but I found it on the shelf at the Superman Museum as something you could just buy. And I was like, holy crap, man, I haven't seen this thing in 30 years. So I bought a new copy and it's on my shelf. But so I remember reading about like how it was one of the first things I ever remember reading how they made the movie, and kind of like having an intro to who all these villains were going to be and all this stuff because I didn't remember I didn't remember the villains from the beginning of the first one. Because I was like 2.5 or 3 when I saw it. But I remember literally standing in my backyard after having had seen it, and we were trying to figure out how to play Superman because there were too many boys, and there's only one Superman, and none of us wanted to be the bad guys. So, but yeah, and then and still standing around thinking about like what a tragic romance that Superman had with Lois. How sad.
That's awesome.
For Superman. He had that swank bed. I don't understand that.
That's awesome.
But it's funny. I was listening to our Empire Strikes Back podcast, Jamie and I did, of kind of like, and romance must have hit me really hard in how it worked in movies when I was that age. Because this is coming off Empire.
How old were you?
I was the same age. I was 5 as Empire.
Superman 2, to me, the tragic romance thing hit me. Like, I think I remember watching this, rewatching it when I'm like 9 and 10 and, crying at times, which seems a little silly looking back now, but because it is kind of a children's version of a unrequited love story. But, it hit me pretty hard. The deal where, he comes into work in the morning and he can't tell her how he feels about her. And then at the end of the movie, she's parroting back the same thing. Now, do you know what it's like for me to have to come in here and not tell you how I feel about you? And, I do know what that's like. That stuff really, really got to me. And on the other hand, as an adult having discussed the movie now, probably too much for an adult, with other fans and things. I mean, it hits me as, a bit too much of an adolescent fantasy version of what a romance should be. And in particular, the idea that he could then take it upon himself to, remove her memory of them having been together, right? Kind of controversial, at least in the online circles in which I frequent. That's kind of a can of worms, the way it's presented in the movie. So the way it's presented in the movie is this sort of self-sacrifice, right? He comes to work and she's very sad and she's like, I'm never going to get over this. And he says, okay, well, just tell me they repeat the just tell me you love me, and he gives her the kiss, and then she doesn't remember who he is, and everything goes back to normal, right? But it's, maybe not such a great idea that he doesn't get her consent to do that. Which is a thing that never occurred to me as a kid. I just thought, well, that's a completely self-sacrificial act that he did there, and he's protecting her, but of course he's also robbing her of any of her agency, so it does not play well anymore for any number of reasons. It gets referred to in Superman circles as super roofies. Right. Yeah.
So yeah,
which I think that's a overly cynical view of it, but I can see where that comes from.
Yeah, And it also, we've now had, what is it, 30 years in the comics of Superman and Lois being married.
Yeah.
And back in the day, it was considered, when the superheroes are no longer like basically sexually available, like they're done. Like if they actually, you can always have Superman dating, air quotes, Lois, but you got to leave him available for the latest mermaid or alien princess or whatever to pop up. And that was always for years and years I collect the classic Lois Lane comics, partially just I through ironic detachment of Lois fretting about Superman kissing some alien princess or mermaid or Lana or whatever. But it yeah, I mean, it doesn't need to be that way. And in particular, I think since to get into comic book land, since Rebirth, they've really leaned into it. Like they finally feel like DC's committed to it and really understood how powerful of a character Lois is and can be, and how important she is as a human figure within the DCU. And that's part of why I'm excited about this Superman and Lois show that's coming out on the CW. Is it feels like they finally know what to do with Lois in an era where we need better reporters and all of that. And I think the Lois and Clark Superman show kind of tried at that for at least the first season. But it was trying to do moonlighting with Superman, and it was just a different thing. So.
I think that idea of the hero can never settle down. Mm-hmm. It's not just in comics, right? I mean, I see it in sitcoms too.
Sure.
They can never, right? They have to maintain the tension, the will they won't they tension forever, past the point where you care anymore whether Ross and Rachel are ever going to get together or whoever it be, because there's this perception that married people are boring, right? I guess there's no dramatic tension there. Once you settle down and you have your happily ever after, well, that's the end of the fairy tale. But I think that for a lot of people, and maybe in my generation, and maybe in me specifically, is having grown up looking at Superman as kind of a less an aspirational figure of like a wish fulfillment of someone that you see yourself in, but more as someone who's like a surrogate father figure. It's not so hard to make that transition to portray him as a father figure, a husband and a father, and there, in fact, there's still plenty of drama left in a family life, and it's good that they've now sort of taken the story into that realm, decades later, and are willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a new kind of story they can tell. I definitely miss, and I think the comics would do well to have a line. I've talked to you privately about this, but I think the comics would do well to have a line that at least keeps people familiar with the early years of Superman before the reveal to Lois and all of that. Because like the Man of Steel movies went right into, well, she knew before he knew he was Superman, sort of thing. Which, has its merits. It makes Amy Adams look very smart, which is always a good thing. But I definitely miss that. One of the things that you miss out with some of that is it sounds like these scenes were written by the Newmans and part of the reshoots in the ridiculous Niagara Falls hotel room. But you get these moments in this movie where you remember Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder are strong actors, and his reveal scene calls back to the scene in Superman the movie where he's, Lois, I have something to tell you, and he straightens up and all that.
Yeah, he straightens up. Yeah.
Like you can see how good these two are in that scene. It only lasts like a minute, but I think it's part of what locks you in with what's going to happen with them now for the rest of the movie. They really, really sell the hell out of that scene. It's just them acting and not, then of course things get, I think necessarily awkward once they're actually in the fortress and he's like, oh God, I've got to feed you, and those sorts of things. But I think, whatever I may think of like Lester's other choices and some of, what happened with the movie, that stuff works. And seeing Superman decide, this is our first time together. I'm going to fly to Central America to go get some beautiful flowers for her for this meal. Is really cool stuff.
That's a very Superman moment too. I love
Mhm.
that. I love that when when Superman comics take something ordinary, like going to get flowers for your girlfriend, and just makes it, big.
Right.
What would Superman do in that instance? He wouldn't just go down to the flower shop. He'd go somewhere to some tropical island somewhere.
Yeah, if you're not a comics reader, one of the things they do now that Lois and Clark have been married for 30 years and they're treated like an old married couple in the comics is, if she wants Vietnamese food, she's getting Vietnamese food.
Yeah.
And I love that, because for him, he can either walk down the block or he can, yeah. So
but going back to that Niagara Falls scene, one of the things that really still holds up for me are a lot of the subtle character beats in this movie.
Everything the bellhop does? Is that what you're talking about?
We just spent the last few minutes, calling out all the things that aren't so great. But one of the things that I still really love is, as you were saying, Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder's performances are fantastic. And in particular, I still can't tell as I'm watching the movie, at what point does he ever decide to reveal it to her? Is he, is it at what point when he's doing his clumsy act, at what point is he acting? Or at what point is he really just nervous being around her? When he's doing the stuff like he's getting hit by the taxi cab at the beginning, right? Because he sees her across the street, she waves at him. And so you get this feeling like, oh, she waved at me. And he forgot that he's standing in the middle of the street and he gets hit by a car, right? You don't feel like, Superman wouldn't have calculated getting hit by the car. That was clearly an actual, mishap because he was distracted by her. And so there are things like that where I'm like, it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch his reactions, and it's fun to sort of wonder about to what extent is he acting here, or to what extent is Superman acting? And to what extent is he really just becoming kind of more like a bundle of nerves, like Clark Kent, around her because he's in love with her?
I don't think, it's clumsy if you think about what Superman's supposed to be, but I think there's no other way to read he tripped over a bear head and fell into the fire than he tripped over a bear head and fell into the fire.
But he's Superman, right? And the movie says it pretty well, I think, when she says, maybe you didn't want to with your head, but you wanted to with your heart, right?
Yeah. And
I totally bought that. I was like, that's great. So he didn't calculate doing it, but he still wanted her to know, and just took it too far. And I love all that stuff. I love most of the stuff in the fortress, how awkward he is with her. I love him going to get the flowers. All that stuff is still holds up and is fantastic.
Yeah, and you also get that nice little moment of her kind of realizing, as they're talking about Clark as a separate person, of, oh right. She puts it as like it's confusing or it's complicated or something like that. But it's like, oh right, I've been around you all of this time in these two different ways. So, and realizing he's not been playing her for a fool, but the necessity out of which he's been doing it. So
I love all the romantic comedy bits too at the beginning, where it's just reestablishing them as a couple, or not a couple, but a maybe couple, where the orange juice freshly squeezed gag that gets repeated and stuff.
I still, how many times have I seen this? I still laugh when he holds up the little cup and it's got like the little dribble of orange juice.
Right. Yeah. Because we joke about how maybe there's a little too much comedy here and there, but some of the comedy really works. So, and that's one of the moments that really worked for me. And when that was one of my disappointments as well with, so going back to the Richard Donner cut, I had for a long time kind of bought into this idea that, you know, the true vision of the movie was compromised and we really need to see this missing footage and whatnot. So I was waiting with pretty high anticipation of the Richard Donner cut. And when it finally came out, what surprised me was there's actually more of the slapstick comedy in there. There's more toilet humor.
There's a literal toilet joke. Yeah.
There's a literal, I mean, it's like, it's just, one of the things I couldn't believe that they took out character moments and added more potty humor. And I just couldn't understand that other than, you know, the explanation that, well, I didn't shoot that part, so I'm not going to include it. But it clearly became to me that, okay, so this version is not about assembling the best version of the movie. This is only about ownership then. This is only about, well, this is what I shot, so that's what I'm going to include. So,
yeah, fortunately, because I was in the same boat. I was like, there was this movie that was going to get made that was going to be this pristine, you know, perfect follow-up to Superman the movie. And then, fortunately, what I'd read about it before it came out, I was like, okay, I'm looking at a draft, like a fat cut of what they've kind of were able to throw together. This is a film school project of doing something no one's ever done before, and that's how I view that cut. Is, you know, they're using footage they shot for his screen tests, so like he's much thinner in some of the scenes.
Yeah. There's even a disclaimer at the beginning. By the way, you're going to notice some continuity errors. It's
Leslie and Warren maybe in some of these shots instead of Margot Kidder.
Right. But I mean, it wasn't sold as that. That was my problem. Was it wasn't sold as that. It wasn't sold as, here's a collection of deleted scenes that we pasted some other scenes in there to make it a whole narrative.
Yeah.
It was sold as, no, this is the true vision of the filmmaker. And I just couldn't. I was really, really disappointed when I saw that movie. I mean, I was prepared to just be like, bestow upon me the true version.
Sure. I think I was like that until I read it. I'm very glad, I guess, I read about it before I finally actually saw it. And I don't know why there was a delay for me of why it took a while for me to see it before I'd read about it. But
I mean, they take out bits of dialogue where they'll take out the setup for the joke, but then they'll leave the they leave the punchline, or vice versa. The bit where, you know, he says to the guy in the diner in the original cut, he says to the guy, you know, would you like to step outside? And the guy kicks his ass. And then he shows up to confront the super criminals, and he says, would you care to step outside again? And you get this idea like, okay, you know, now he's taking, it's not just about, you know, helping get rid of this, but for him, it's a personal, now I'm back to myself again. Now I'm going to relive this moment, and as it should have been, right? And they took out that line. I couldn't believe they took out that line and replaced it with a terrible, campy line.
I don't even remember what he said.
I remember what it was, but it was, haven't you ever heard of freedom of the press? Because they were attacked the planet building.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many moments like that where I'm just like, how could you remove this great stuff? And even the Marlon Brando footage, which I was, you know, the biggest, to me, the biggest thing missing was what happens when he goes back to the fortress, right? Because in the theatrical cut, they say, okay, you can depower yourself, but it's permanent, right? You can't take it back. He's like, okay. And then he's like, well, I got to go back. And he goes back, he picks up the thing, and then they cut away. And so what they end up doing is not showing the biggest super feat he ever accomplished, which was he accomplished, you know, he did the unattainable thing, right? Well, what did he do? How did he do it? Right? And when I finally saw what he did, it wasn't that great.
I don't even remember what he does in that. What does he do in the Donner cut?
Marlon Brando shows up and says,
"Oh, right,
I can give you back your powers, but it basically means, you know, it'll kill me again."
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I'd forgotten that.
Just to further guilt trip you.
Which, you know, it's yeah, I know why they cut it out for the theatrical version, because you already have that beat of them blowing up the control panel.
Yeah.
So, which Yeah, I mean, you get that a lot more as an adult than I think you do when you're 5 watching the movie. But
Well, and I honestly think that the way that his mother relates to him is better in the original cut than the way that his father relates to him. In both that scene and in the scene where he asks to be depowered, because in the Marlon Brando footage, it's Brando basically guilting him the whole time. He's like, think about the people you can't help anymore. I thought, I'm disappointed in you, basically. And Christopher Reeve's response is appropriately defiant, like a teenager. I'm going to do what I want to do. And he even says the same thing. He says the line, I love her, the same way he says the same words that he says in the theatrical cut. I love her, but he says it in a defiant way. In the original cut, it's his mother pleading with him not to do this. And when he says, I love her, it's in a way like, well, this is just inevitable. I love her. I can't help it.
Right.
And it's just, it was so disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, I think it's an interesting exercise in how movies are assembled and kind of what happens behind the scenes for these things that we think of as having, well, there was a script and it was shot and all we do is paste the thing together at the end, which is ideal, but not, how things often end up working out. And you always hear these things about how editors end up saving the day or saving movies or whatever. And so it's if nothing else, it's worth taking a look at that. We're a few days out as we're recording this from them announcing that they're going to release the Snyder Cut at long last of Justice League, which frankly I'm curious to see. I've already signed up for my HBO Now subscription and I will watch it when it comes out, because I'm just, from a technical perspective, curious to see from the mess that we got of Justice League how, whatever Snyder kind of had in mind, because I think this thing's also going to end up needing a disclaimer at the beginning, because it's not like they can get everyone back together to go shoot new stuff to fill in the gaps. So,
but it's already completed. We've been told.
Yeah.
We've been told.
Yeah. I think we're going to see some CGI characters floating around is what I think is going to happen. But
as you know, I can just say that as badly as I've personally seen the Snyder Cut people online behave, that I sort of secretly hope that they get the same experience that I got when I saw the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2 and realized that, after all, it's not better.
My suspicion is it will be very much like my experience with Phantom Menace, where I was 6 months out from having had seen it the first time and rewatching it on VHS when it came out and was like, oh, this is as bad as people said it was.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Well, I mean, because I that was at that point a religious belief that Star Wars was going to be good when it came back. So we'll see what ends up happening. But one of the things I think is interesting about both versions of the movie, but in particular, I was thinking about it watching the theatrical version. You have the Superman the movie that pitches this somber sci-fi tone to Krypton, and then the Andrew Wyeth Smallville scenes, and then you get to the city, and the first thing you hear is the Otis all that good stuff, and okay, things are a little goofier. Is how goofy humanity is portrayed in Superman 2. In some ways I find delightful, as much as I talk about the guy in the roller skates is not a good choice at that point in the movie. But there's the whole Kill Bill speech or whatever about, they see humanity as fallible. Well, that's the tone of, these movies is the same thing of the kid falling off the rail attacker falls, which, to begin with. And then when he's flying the kid back up or when he's flying down, I can't remember which part it is in the 10-second sequence, but you hear the lady going, of course he's Jewish. There's a real, this is he is a Superman among men for many reasons. Like, people are kind of goofy, and Superman's just doing his best to keep us all from blowing ourselves up. Like, it's kind of a delightful take on how, you know, in Superman 1 you have like the cops kind of bantering about like, yeah, you go ahead and get started at the bar, I'll go catch up with you. And this one and so it kind of, you're talking about the Lois and Clark kind of romantic comedy. That flavor of the comedy in the movie I actually still really, really like. Like, I think that stuff just works. And there's just, you know, tons of examples throughout the movie of you know, how they kind of portray people, including the other woman, Lulene, who's in the office.
Yeah, Lulene, right.
Who's kind of obnoxious and into non in a way that's not appropriate.
That's right. Yeah. The thing that struck me this last time watching it as being kind of adorably childish was the bit where General Zod, now having taken over the world, has absolutely no interest in management of any kind. He's like,
yeah.
he takes he goes in and he takes over the world because that's what you do. It's just like he's some sort of taking over the world robot, that's his programming. But then once he's in charge, he has absolutely no vision. He has no agenda. He has no interest in
cough.
Yeah. And yeah. And I got the feeling like if they had just sort of waited him out, he probably would have just called the president back and said, you know what, you can have it back. Because all these people are asking for things. They want me to help them, and I just don't want to deal with it.
I just wanted people to kneel before
I just wanted people to kneel. Like, he literally just wanted people to acknowledge that he's in charge and then go on about their day as normal.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what to do. And, I think that's adorable.
Yeah. That scene where they're clearly bored sitting around the Oval Office, like, whoops, well, I guess we done one. Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating little bit of insight into, you know, it's
almost like they know that they're comic book characters and they're not supposed to win, right? Mm-hmm. So we're the bad guy. We're not supposed to win, but here we are having won. There's no precedent for this. We don't know what to do now. Yeah.
I mean, I think part of why people, you know, do remember this one and they remember the villains so well is they are all clearly defined. They do some things that when you're a kid are scary. As an adult, they're, you know, kind of ridiculous. You know, the movie does make a choice to hire the same cop from 2 James Bond movies, who was the cop in Live and Let Die, and I'm trying to remember the other one he's in, because he shows up in like Bangkok or something.
And I actually like the comedy too between him and the deputy, where the deputy is like constantly trying to prove he's not a wimp, by ordering the wrong thing at the restaurant or something.
It's a wide selection.
It's a wide selection. That's right. Yeah, all that stuff, even when there's not, you know, super heroics happening, there's funny stuff going on. I just enjoy watching it.
Yeah, it does. You know, we haven't talked very much about the fact that it did come out in this era, kind of before people had home video. We did talk about how, you know, it wasn't intended to be picked apart the way we have, but it does begin with like a full like 5 minutes of Superman the movie. You know, like last time on Superman.
Well, they had to do that because, I mean, honestly, you know, probably people hadn't seen Superman the movie for a couple of years, and they wouldn't remember that. And I actually really like that opening. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie when I was a kid too, because like you get to see all of Superman in the movie in like 2.5 minutes, all the coolest parts with the John Williams score. It's like a little music video.
Yeah. It's just interesting to think about like the thinking that went into that, or I missed Superman when it came out, so I do want to watch the sequel, so we're going to help you out, sort of thing that the movie does. I mean, you don't end up sitting through 3 minutes of just names flying by. Like I like the original credits on the original Superman the movie. I'll never throw stones, but ain't nothing actually happening during that.
No. I liked watching it once, but I don't think that if that had become, a habit or that become the norm, I would got pretty bored.
Well, I remember going to see Superman Returns, and they kind of did that, and I was like, "Ooh, that's a bold choice, Bryan Singer."
Yeah, but everything, and I remember that too. But what I remember about it was everything was too, like, it rushes by too quickly.
Yeah,
like
they were
kind of
concerned.
zooms up at you, and then you get the twist around real fast, and the whoosh sounds are whooshing, and like they're really trying to make sure that you're not falling asleep there.
Yeah.
But
We want to do this, but we also know you'll get bored of it. So
yeah, I mean, but that's it ends up having, to me at least, it had a completely different character to it. Whereas the original was more about that feeling of flying through space and you don't know what you're going to see and things like that. It felt more kind of majestic, and this was in your face.
Yeah, so Zod and Ursa and Nan were not like major characters in the Superman comics. It's kind of weird that they're the ones that they picked. The place that was held by them during this era, from what I picked up from my Bronze Age, dollar bin diving, it's mostly Jack Sewer and Feora, right? I mean,
yeah, I think
Nan wasn't really anywhere to be seen.
They probably just liked those names better, I think.
Yeah,
they really wanted it to be the Jexer story, but they thought General Zod sounds cooler, which it does.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fine. And I honestly, I mean, he's such an uncomplicated villain, but I don't know. He's very much a cartoon character. I don't know what his motivation is, other than I just want people to kneel to me. I think that's cool.
It's funny because the last 3 movies I watched all pretty much had that as the villain's motivation. Because I watched this, and then I watched Commando, and then I watched Invasion USA of all freaking movies last night. And it was at the end of all the movies, like, what did they want?
What did they want? Yeah. So that's one of the ways I would say that actually Man of Steel did improve on the original films, is I thought, first of all, Michael Shannon was really good as General Zod, and that their version of General Zod actually had a point of view.
Yeah.
That you could understand, and you could say, I see where he's coming from, but yeah, this is a very, I mean, as you said, it was more emblematic of the comics at the time, and comics at the time were fairly simple, morality tales. The villain is a monster that breaks out and wants to create havoc. Mm-hmm. And that's what they are.
Yeah, they're still mad at Jor-El, and yeah. But anyway, I don't want to bag on it. I still enjoy it. I think it's got some great stuff in it. I probably, but I also realized it had probably actually for me been a few years since I'd watched it when I put it in, which is amazing because there was a window in there where this and Superman the movie were being shown in my house, once a month or if not more. And it's fun to kind of go back because, next up we're going to have to do Superman 3, and this is going to be a very different kind of conversation.
What's funny about Superman, so I watched Superman 2 with my 5-year-old, who's a Superman fan. Mm-hmm. He watches Superman the movie all the time. For some reason, that doesn't bore him. But the first half of Superman 2 kind of bores him, and so he rarely watches it. But this time he managed to stay through it enough of the way to get to the super fight. That part he really liked. But Superman 3, for some reason, and I think the reason is because Clark relates to the kid.
Yeah.
Okay. He's watched Superman 3 almost as much as Superman the movie. And he'll even role play to where he's like, get up, Superman, you're just in a slump. You'll be great again. He does that with me.
At least that's who he's role playing. He's not getting a blanket and skis out.
Yeah, so I mean, it's weird to me, I guess, because when I was a kid, Superman 2 was the one that I watched the most often because the backstory had already been established, and now you're moving into what feels like the main story, where he confronts the ultimate, the villains, and realizes that he can't settle down and be happy, and all those things happen. And he really did enjoy that. Watching his confusion at the strange powers that emerge at the Fortress of Solitude was also pretty fun. Because,
yeah, we have completely neglected to talk about that aspect, and that's the stuff I assume is Lester.
So yeah, I mean, my son is a Superman fan, so he watches cartoons. He reads some of the comics with me, so he knows Superman stuff. And he's watching this movie with me, and all of a sudden, laser beams start coming out of people's fingers, and he's like, "What?" And the cellophane S comes out, and he's like, "What is going on here?"
I have waited. When Jeff Johns really took the hard, position of we need to make the comics more like Superman the movie world, around the time of Superman Returns and all of that, and Infinite Crisis, I have really expected them to at some point have the cellophane S be a thing. I don't think they'd ever do the whole strange, blinky Superman appearing in multiple locations thing. But yeah,
so I assume the reason they did that stuff was because they knew that they couldn't convincingly show a brawl, right? A fist fight, because that's the next. At that point, there's nowhere to go, right? We're done throwing each other through buildings, which you can kind of do in slow motion or far off, shots. But now we're in close quarters. The next thing to do is to throw punches. And they knew that they couldn't really do that and make it look good. And so we had to just come up with things to do, like, laser beams out of our fingers and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty weird. But it's one of those things, I don't want to say I'm defending it, but it's just, I guess it's just one of those things I've come to accept about it. It's like, okay, so the one power that I actually will defend, though, is where he appears in multiple places.
Are you going with the Flash concept of he is quickly popping between all of those places?
I am, because actually I have a Superboy comic book where he plays an all-star game of baseball. He plays every position.
I know what you're talking about.
They show him zooming between positions in order to play the game, and that's how I justified that in my head. Like, no, he's not really in multiple places. He's not projecting illusions of himself.
Except he turns himself into a statue, and he's a hologram that they pass through. But yeah, it's a
that's Fortress technology right there.
But it tells you kind of, and it's really hard. It is amazingly hard to convince people under a certain age that at one point people didn't take superheroes seriously. And and this is kind of an indication of that. Of like, even in this movie where we have a pretty well-defined character, we don't really give a shit. He's an alien from outer space, and anything we say, what's the difference between this and super ventriloquism? Well, honestly, there isn't any, other than we haven't seen it before. But yeah, Zod superheating the gun, on board with it. Got it. Loading the shotgun over to him. It's like, it looks cool in the moment, but you've just opened a whole can of worms.
How can they levitate stuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't know. I mean, it is what it is.
And Superman at the end of this movie, in this cut, straight up murders. Lois murders one of them. Like, I know that there's a cut out there somewhere with footage of the Krypton villains getting dropped off in jail.
They got, the cops come and pick them up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was actually that's another point of contention, because people point that out every time you talk about the neck snapping in Man of Steel, right? Well, he killed the villains in Superman 2, and he did it with a smile.
Yeah. And
so I asked my kid when we watched it this time, what do you think happened to the villains at the end? He's like, I don't know. I was like, do you think they died down? Do you think they fell to their death? Like, I don't know. So I don't know. I guess it reads as a death on cursory viewing, but I don't know. It's kind of ambiguous. It's possible that they're down there somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the Donner cut, he then blows up the fortress after that, right?
I don't know if that's in the Donner cut, but yeah, I know it was shot. That was, yeah. There was a version shot where he blows up the fortress. I think it was aired on TV.
Okay, that's where I saw it. All right. Yeah. I mean, again, we've both watched too many cuts of these dumb movies, but
it's hard to keep them straight.
But yeah, I wish that were in the movie, because I honestly think it would have been hilarious to have a shot or a scene of Zod, like, in the same shop with Otis and Lex,
But that begs the question: if the cops show up, it begs the question of whose jurisdiction is this exactly? I mean, where are they? So I guess they're
going to prison, eh?
Exactly. Yeah. So they never really say where the fortress is. I assumed it was closer to the North Pole, to where it was like no people are around there. But if there's now cops showing up, then it's like, oh, maybe Superman can just go, 50 miles that way and get to the nearest general store or whatever. I don't know,
Well, apparently there's an Avis car rental somewhere nearby. So
that's right.
I mean, I flat out have no clue how. Yeah, I mean, they say the North Pole at some point in the movie. Lex does, but it's hard to know. And the movie does play
with global warming. I guess it's more believable now that the North Pole actually is more accessible.
Right. But yeah, it definitely has all those sorts of things kind of working against it, and you if you're watching it with a 5-year-old, like you said, I think it's going to fly over your head. As an adult, you're kind of like, we are in this era where they try and make these movies make some kind of logical sense, or at least have internal logic.
But I mean, I think you talk about how it doesn't really hold up to today, but it's important to note just the cultural impact that this had as far as superhero movies. I mean, this reigned for like a decade, I think, as the definitive superhero movie until Tim Burton's Batman came along.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
This was the pinnacle of superhero cinema. This is what everybody referred to, or what everybody thought of when they thought of superheroes at the movies.
Mm-hmm.
This is what everyone was aiming for. And still, to the point when they were making Spider-Man movies, you could see that they were consciously riffing off of this movie.
The movie is very much what Gen X thinks of, and I do like the fact that people remember the movie so fondly. But the only reason, and I'm not trying to bag on this movie. I love it, I enjoy it, but I do try and remind people, if you do watch both of them, Superman the movie is not as boring as you remember it from when you were 8 and you needed to see punching and lasers every 3 seconds to enjoy a movie. It's as we said, a film. This one's much more of it's a great popcorn movie. Totally endorse it. But it's also interesting after multiple viewings to see all those seams and kind of see all of the things that happened because of the struggles in production, and to do kind of wonder what some of those decision-making processes were as they were heading to release this thing. Yeah,
absolutely. It's I mean, I think it'll always be a staple of like 80s action, 80s sci-fi cinema, and it's remembered fondly by, as you said, like Generation X, people who grew up with me. Everybody. I remember going to a birthday party when I was a kid, somebody else's birthday party, and somebody wanting to put on a Superman movie, and the unanimous choice was Superman 2 because Superman the movie was too boring.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's fondly remembered.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I look forward to the antics of Richard Pryor in the next episode.
Yeah, we don't have to just do Superman 3. We could do something else in between. But I do want to end up getting through all of this initial wave of movies, because talking about Superman 4 is going to be a trip. But yeah, thank you so much for some super conversation.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Talk to you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
You read my mind. Do you know what things you do to me. Don't know who you are, just a friend from another star. Here I am, like a kid out of school, holding hands with a gun. I'm a fool. Will you look at me, quivering like a little girl, shivering? You can see right through me. Can you read my mind?
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed this podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. You can drop comments on this podcast and let us know what you think. We do have a Signal Watch Patreon, and if you're so moved, we'd most certainly appreciate your support. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies. You've got to be kind.